Okay, thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. Gonghe Fatoi, and Happy New Year to everyone, and welcome to Get Connected's Lunar New Year celebration. Get Connected is so proud to partner with the National Association of Asian American Professionals, NAP Boston chapter. For the past 14 years, if you can believe that, NAP has been a partner of Get Connected, our first affinity partner. And I would say, we want to thank GBH, who has, I think GBH started partnering with us when we had our event on Boylston Street, like maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And they continue to partner with Get Connected. And of course, my dear friend Leverett Wing and Commonwealth, and my friend Liz Chen, who believes in Get Connected, and PNC Bank. So tonight, I think, is a timely time to discuss Asian women who are exemplifying true leadership in their careers and personal lives during what I like to call the best of times and the worst of times as we deal with two pandemics, both COVID-19 and racial inequality. The Lunar New Year event celebrates the year of the tiger. And as Katy Perry says, you're going to hear us roar. And so tonight we are showcasing a distinguished panel of accomplished Asian American women. And to kick off this event, it is my honor to introduce the mayor of Boston, the Honorable Michelle Wu, the first person of color, the first Asian American, and the first woman to be elected to this office. Long before Michelle Wu became Madam Mayor, she has been a transformative and a visionary leader whom, as Boston City Council and Council President, approached all of her policies with transparency and with an inclusive and equitable lens. It means just that no one will be excluded from the table. Everyone will have a seat and a voice, and there will be full transparency. I have known the mayor for almost 15 years, and I'm proud to call her a mentee. And I know that she will continue to do incredible things for our city. I would be remiss, however, if I did not mention the big elephant in the room. Women of color often are faced with a double whammy, that of misogyny, of being a woman, and discrimination as a person of color. At this inflection time in our city and country, our mayor believes that to heal and build community, we must not normalize hate. Madam Mayor, I want you to know that there are close to 200 people, more than 300 registered for this Zoom event tonight. You are an inspiration to so many of us, both at this event and in Boston. Women like Tanisha Sullivan and Sonia Chan Diaz, two women of color who are taking and following your lead, running for statewide office. Tanisha is running to be the first woman and first person of color Secretary of State, and Sonia Chan Diaz is running as the first Latina Asian woman to run for governor. And please know, Madam Mayor, that we are all in the gap, standing with you to support you and standing by you as you lead our great city. So thank you for being here. And now I give you Madam Mayor Gong Hei Fat Choi.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Colette. I am so grateful to you as not only my longtime mentor and friend, but someone who has been standing in the gap long before most institutions were thinking about multicultural, multiracial priorities and representation. You have been hosting these amazing networking and connecting and community building opportunities for years in our city. And so we are all indebted to you for your leadership, and you're always believing fiercely in what it means to have all voices at the table. I'm so honored to be here with this incredible panel and group of leaders. I see, of course, my friend and colleague in city government, our city council president, Ed Flynn, is here, who has always been such a staunch ally and champion for issues of representation and justice and language access and equity and equality. So I'm always grateful for Ed standing strong and calling out what needs to be called out, and building community also in all the ways through the platforms that he has. I see a lot of friends on the attendee list too, and from Charlotte Gola-Ritchie, who helped lead our transition committee, to Mel Poindexter, and so many friends and community members who have been ensuring that Boston leads the way in bringing our communities together. And of course, to fellow panelists here who are trailblazers, and I just identify and love in so many ways, because we each have been in the only in many rooms, and it's always a decision point of what that means and how much to sort of call out or take on in that instant when there's so much to call out sometimes. And so I'm grateful, especially to our family friend Leverett Wing, one of my heroes, Shirley Liang, who is a voice of justice in so many ways. Liz Chang, such a longtime hero in our community as well. Anyway, okay, I'm gonna stop because there's so many people I need to recognize and thank. I just wanted to reflect on what brings us together here, Lunar New Year, and the celebration that this represents in certain cultures and in the customs and traditions that I was shared and raised in. The idea of Lunar New Year comes from the story, the legend of a mythical monster, right? A Nian monster that would terrorize a village every single year on a regular basis. And for a while, for a long time, that was just how the way things were for the villagers. And you kind of hoped that when it came time for this horrible situation to arise on a regular recurring basis, that you would just try to hide on your own. You just try to take care of your own family and try to make sure that you wouldn't be the one that would be sort of eaten up or gobbled up or hurt by the Nian monster that year. And then eventually, what we mark now and what is celebrated in the legend is that at a certain point, the villagers decided that enough was enough, and that together they could take on this horrible challenge and monster that was in front of them, that they knew affected each person and each family, and that no one alone could really overcome, but that together they might have a chance. And so what they did then was to band together and prepare. And they got as bright red clothes and colors and papers to cover everything to try to scare off the monster. They created firecrackers that they would set off all at the same time to scare the monster away. And they coordinated all their activities. And that year, when the monster showed up, there was such a display of noise and sound and bright colors and lights that the monster was so scared that it left and never came back again. And that idea that we are all stronger and can overcome any challenge when we band together and coordinate and really believe in the power that we collectively have, that is what we need now more than ever. in a moment where we are, as Colette was saying, still surrounded by many monsters and the challenges of racism and anti-Semitism and hate that continues to rear its head, even here locally. We know that as we celebrate big steps forward, and we have in the last couple years celebrated our first, our historic vice president, our first Black and Asian American and woman vice president. We've celebrated our first Black mayor of Boston, Mayor Kim Janey, who continues to be an advisor and friend and someone I look up to. She has left a print of Kamala Harris right in my office here for me with a note that we should remember not to be the last. And so as we celebrate these historic steps forward, locally, statewide, nationally, and the progress that is still to come, let it be a moment where we remember our power collectively together, because there's still a lot to take on, a lot of challenges and crises that we need to band together and fight against. We know that this country continues to mourn Black lives that have been lost, that have galvanized a historic modern civil rights movement, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with the leaders in the Black Lives Matter movement and know that the same roots of hatred and racism and anti-Blackness are the roots of anti-Asian violence and assaults that we have seen. So now's a moment where we truly can come together, and in Boston, our determination, I know Ed and I and our colleagues at the city level know that we can be that leader standing in the gap. So from tackling the challenges of homelessness and the opiate crisis to the strain on our school system and the ongoing public health challenges in this pandemic, it's going to take each one of us seeing our collective power in each other and banding together. So I'm so grateful and thankful for this group, friends who I've met through Get Connected over the years and leaders who I look up to. Thank you so much for having me, and I wish everyone a very happy new year. 新年快乐，祝大家身体健康，万事如意。Thank you so much.
So much. Thank you so much, Madam Mayor, for we are humbled and honored that you took the time out of your very busy schedule to join us and for your powerful words. Now, I am very pleased to introduce a good friend, both of myself and Get Connected, Shirley Leon. Shirley is a columnist and associate editor at the Boston Globe, who has written on everything from the intersection of business and politics to gender and diversity issues in the workplace. She also has been the Globe's business editor, where she oversaw its award-winning coverage of the 2008 financial crisis and also served as the editorial page editor. I will say that no media or journalist in Boston has done more to advance gender, racial, inclusive, equity, diversity than Shirley. And I am just always in awe of her and her presence. And she never says no to me when it comes to moderating a Get Connected. So thank you, Shirley, for always standing in the gap for inclusion.
Thank you, Colette. This is Zoom. So I think before we get to the panel, I think we're going to go to, is it Ed? City Council President Ed Flynn first, right? a little change in the schedule, right? Do I have that right?
Absolutely. The president, the city council president has always been at our Lunar New Year since he got elected. We were last in person in 2020. So President Flynn, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Colette and Get Connected, for inviting me to be part of tonight's important discussion. I'm honored to join my friend and colleague, Mayor Wu, in this impressive group of Asian American political, business, community leaders. As the president of the Boston City Council, proud to represent the largest Asian community in Boston. Since COVID-19 pandemic began, the AAPI community and many of our immigrant neighbors have faced challenges, including cases of racism, discrimination, hate crimes, whether it's in Massachusetts or across the country. And we have heard harrowing stories of Asian Americans being subjected to slurs, businesses being robbed, and seniors and women being assaulted. There's a strong anti-Asian sentiment here in Massachusetts and throughout the country. There's a strong anti-Asian sentiment that is in society today. And I've noticed it significantly as the district city councilor here in Boston. Boston's no exception. Despite the significant adversity that the Asian American community has faced during this pandemic, Asian women especially have shown resilience, courage, resourcefulness in the face of this adversity and discrimination. I greatly admire the cooperation of different groups in the community, civic leaders such as yourself, and we're so proud to have the first woman elected mayor of the city of Boston, Michelle Wu, who's a close friend, as I mentioned. And I was talking to a friend of mine from South Boston the other day. I mentioned to him that the demonstrations out in front of the mayor's house, unconscionable, the racial slurs that they're saying to the mayor, who's doing an outstanding job. But those comments would not be directed at Mayor Flynn or Mayor Walsh or Mayor Menino, an Irish or Italian mayors. They're directed at a woman mayor. So that's why I discussed discrimination and racism in society today. It's important to acknowledge it, but it's also important to work together and address it and make sure we provide our residents, especially our immigrant neighbors, with services and programs, and to treat all of our immigrant neighbors with respect and dignity. I'm honored to be here. I want to listen to the esteemed colleagues that are on this Zoom tonight. So thank you, Colette, and thank you to the wonderful people that are here tonight.
Shirley, it's back to you.
It's not back to me. It's back to Chenmei. All right, sorry. We had our practice run got a little cut short today, but this is Zoom. So anyways, Chenmei, I think you're on next, right? And then it's me.
Yes. I'll pass it back to you, Shirley. Thank you very much.
Oh, maybe we're not. I thought you were giving some remarks from Nap. No?
Yes, I am.
Maybe I'm confused.
No, you're correct, Shirley.
Okay, good.
Well, thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Colette. I'm delighted here to represent NAP Boston to support and partner with Get Connected. NAP stands for the National Association of Asian American Professionals. It's important for us to celebrate the achievements of AAPI professionals, especially women leaders like our panelists, whenever possible. NAP is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year with the theme Limitless Leadership. Here at NAP Boston, we're a community of Asian American professionals who aspire to raise the bar of what it means to lead and work on initiatives that create meaningful impact. Here at NAP Boston, we build leaders. NAP Boston and Get Connected started partnering back in 2007. Get Connected was one of the first to promote and support diversity and inclusion events here in the Boston area, leading the way for NAP Boston to meet and connect with more leaders from other organizations of color. We have continued to sponsor and support Get Connected's events, such as their annual CEO C-Suite Speed Mentoring Masterclass, to provide mentoring and executive coaching to BIPOC professionals and entrepreneurs. Most recently, NAP Boston and Get Connected partnered on the event Cultural Allyship in May 2020, discussing how people of color can work together to support each other during the COVID-19 pandemic. Back in fall of 2021, NAP Boston also proudly sponsored Get Connected's Professionals Women's event, What You Need to Know. NAP Boston wishes you all an upcoming healthy, safe, and prosperous year of the tiger. Please enjoy tonight's event, Asian Women's Voices Rise. I'll now hand the program to Shirley.
Yes, now it's my turn. Anyways, thank you, Chemme, for NAP's leadership and partnership with Collect. It was so great to see Mayor Wu. I've seen her at many of these events in the past. It was great to hear from Council President Flynn. I don't know if we could see Leverett Wing. Leverett is here as well as a sponsor and partner in crime with Colette. So I'm excited to be here. This is part of my Lunar New Year tradition. I've been to many of these events. I think the 2020 event was a big gathering at the Omni, and it was fantastic. And so I'm hoping that next year we can be in person. So let me practice a little Chinese. Gong hei fat choi and xin nian kuai le, though it's not as good as Mayor Wu's Chinese. Anyways, I'm delighted to moderate again, and I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I'm going to have each of our panelists on separately, and then we're going to bring them together at the end on the virtual stage together. And then, but I'm not going to be the only one tonight asking questions. I want you in the audience to throw in some questions. I think we're using the Q&A function tonight, so send them through there. Anyways, we're going to start with Tracy Zen. I think are you on? It's hard to tell with these screens. You're on, right?
I'm on.
So we're going to have you on first. So Tracy is president of Zipcar. That's the world's, I know everybody knows what Zipcar is, but it's the world's leading car sharing network. Tracy became president in 2017, and her priority is to drive innovation and leverage technology to cement Zipcar's position in the industry. She has more than 20 years of experience in leadership roles at consumer tech companies, including TripAdvisor, which is I think headquartered in Needham, right? And also she was at Expedia. She sits on the board of Macy's. Does that mean you get to go to the parade?
You can, yeah.
That's pretty good perk. And she also co-chairs the board of trustees for the Massachusetts Technology Leadership Council. Tracy, welcome. It's good to see you again.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. Good evening. And thank you, Colette, for inviting me to this Get Connected Lunar New Year event. It's my first time joining, so I'm thrilled and honored to join all these esteemed panelists to talk about and to celebrate the new year of the tiger, and to talk about issues that are facing our community. So thank you very much for having me this evening.
So Tracy, last Lunar New Year, when we were doing this, there was a spate of violent attacks against elderly Asian Americans. And then in March, 6 Asian American women were killed in a mass shooting in the Atlanta area. And, we talked about this, Asian Americans have always dealt with hate, but this time felt different. I mean, how have you processed all of this over the past year?
Yeah, it did feel different. Shirley and I talked a little bit about this, and I think Asian Americans have always been marginalized to some extent, but these violent murders, I think, was sort of a very brazen level of attacks on the Asian American community that was very, I would say, troubling and heartbreaking. My initial reaction to the Atlanta killings, for example, was, initially outrage, and then I think for me, what really hit home was, when I spoke to my mother lives in New York City, and she's been living there for over 40 years. And what she said to me was, I don't want to go out on my own anymore. I don't feel safe. And for me to hear, my own mother not feel safe in a community that she's lived in for many, many years, that was truly heartbreaking. And for several weeks, she wouldn't leave the house without my dad with her. So that for me felt like, it hit home, but also it's been a real issue. And I think that if you look at the statistics, there was a study done by the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism, which had stats. And I think in the first quarter of 2021, the violence against Asian Americans in major US cities has increased by 169%. So that's really scary. And so it's certainly an issue that is on the rise, as Councillor Flynn mentioned earlier.
Yes, so many of us share very similar stories. Like I actually remember writing a column called Talk, where, a lot of Black families have to talk to their sons about how to deal with law enforcement. And I felt like a lot of Asian Americans were giving that version of the talk last year, whether to their elderly parents, be careful when you go out, don't go out alone. Or for me, I was giving the talk to my young boys, some of the, I remember the 8-year-old, I was telling him, you're Asian American, you may experience some hate and bullying. And the first question from him was, what's Asian American? He was so young, it didn't occur to him that he's different. So it's for some of us, we've had to, for a lot of us, for me growing up, my parents, they didn't really deal with, there was almost like buck up, right? this is America, this is America, and a lot of us were immigrants, come from immigrant families, so we're but it seems like this time we're confronting the issue and talking about it, which is healthy. So there have been studies on Asian Americans and how we're the least likely group to be promoted. And you've been able to break through, as president of Zipcar. And so what have you done differently in your career?
Yeah, yes, there's studies, but also I think if you also look at, there's another study that was that's done every year about women in the workplace by McKinsey publishes the study. I think it's done in conjunction with leanin.org. And I think the stat was pretty bleak. It was like 4% of the C-suite are women of color. So, we've got a long way to go. But if you ask me about my personal experience, I think, I wouldn't say that I had like a master plan on success that I would be, here in X many years. I think for me, I've come from an immigrant family, so I've always had a strong work ethic. I think that it goes a long way in terms of working hard and, throughout my career. But I think that the one thing, if I had to look back on my career and what I feel has been consistent, has been about the career choices that I've made along the way were really based on people. So I chose to work for leaders that I admire, that I respect, and I felt that I can learn from. And I think in sometimes, I would, it wasn't easy, these decisions to I wouldn't go for the title. I wouldn't actually go for the pay, but I would actually go for the people. And I think that, in hindsight, I also recognize that these were people that also were extremely equitable and inclusive in terms of my career development, in terms of supporting my growth, and even just from a mentorship standpoint, challenging me to take on roles that I was like, well, I don't have experience doing X, Y, and Z. And they're like, oh, you should try. And I remember one experience with he was the vice chairman of a company that put me in a role that I didn't feel that I was qualified to do. I was very young, and I remember him saying to me, I was like, well, I'm really happy in my current role. Why do you want me to do that role? And he was like, you know what? Why don't you try? If you don't like it, you can go back. And I think to have that kind of support and a leader, a senior person in the organization, I was early 20s, and that was really powerful in my career. And I think for me, it's I always get asked, what advice would you give, especially women? I would say, really make sure that you choose the people amongst other things when you think about your career options.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Those are great insights. I know Liz would like Liz Chang, who's going to be on with us next. She actually had a thought being the former journalist and current journalist or journalism roots that she is. She said she wondered if it was your industry. Do you think there's something about tech? I mean, do you think tech tries to, you know, help women, or is it even harder? You know, or what have you, you know, what do you, you know, is there something about your industry?
I think tech is even more difficult in some ways, right? If you look at the stat I gave you from the study was really sort of across all industries. Like if you look at retail, for example, you will see more women, but tech, I mean, I'm kind of in the cross section of tech and automotive. And, you know, there aren't many people that look like me. So I think that tech, not necessarily, but I do think that there's been concerted efforts to uplift women in technology. There's so many organizations out there. There are venture firms out there that now are only funding women businesses. So I think it's certainly changing. And some of the, you know, especially on boards, I think that's another really important aspect of really pushing for more women on boards. California is leading the charge on that. And I think all of those things will make its way through, but it's slow, right? I mean, to get to 4% to get to 50%, you know, we've got a long way to go. And I think that spans all industries and across the board.
Great. All right. One last question, which is, I just have to ask you about Zipcar because, you know, it's such a household brand, and I'm not sure how many people know it's actually even still headquartered here. It was certainly founded here, and I think you're like 500 employees here right now. So what is, I know we could spend the rest of the panel talking about the future of cars and the sharing economy, but how is Zipcar doing now, and how has the pandemic changed your business?
Yeah, I mean, Zipcar was founded locally. It was actually founded by two women. I just want to add. I think it's important to know. When we've been in the, you know, we've pioneered the car sharing space. We've been around for about 21 years now. So it is sort of there's a lot of legacy here. You know, the pandemic for us has been a roller coaster. I'm sure, like many mobility businesses, they've seen sort of this crazy sort of, you know, when the lockdowns happen, everything shut down. You know, for us, you know, we were considered an essential service at the time, so we had to continue operations, and that was, you know, that posed challenges on multiple fronts. First, you know, the safety of our employees and our members was, you know, number one. So I just remember kind of we were all in crisis mode, trying to figure out how do we source PPE, how do we change our policies to make sure that the cars were safe for our vendors, for our employees, for our members. So there was a lot going on, and I think that, you know, we muddled through it, you know, but I think we've come out actually stronger and than ever. I mean, I think what we've seen, it has really been you know, a big surge in demand for our service, because we saw that our members were using us for more essential trips, so grocery runs, doctor's appointments, visiting friends and family, and that really shifted our business case, our use cases, and through the pandemic. And, you know, for us, you know, as a leader, you know, our challenges were really, you know, how do you know, we went 100% remote overnight. You know, we did. I remember last, you know, in 2020, we did a dry run to say, okay, like, what if this thing really kind of catches fire? How would the organization, like, I remember that was a Friday the 13th, on March 13th, and we never came back, right, to the office. So so it was sort of leading through an organization where there's been lots of, you know, changes and decisions happening on the go, and you know, and decisions that, you know, were really local to some extent. You know, the different cities had different regulations, had different policies around COVID. So just, you know, we had a crisis team, you know, and for me, it was really around two things. One was being decisive around and being transparent around the decisions, and communicating that to the organization in a speedy manner. I remember we used to do like quarterly town halls. We did bi-weekly town halls at the peak of COVID, just to ensure that all of our employees knew what was going on. And I think secondly was really kind of making sure that we had a really clear North Star on, you know, what was really important, and because it was so easy to get distracted. And so for us, we're a mission-led business. You know, our mission is to enable simple and responsible urban living. So we had a bunch of initiatives that were really critical, and we kind of kept focused, kept charging on. And I think, you know, that's kind of landed us in a really great place right now. Membership's growing, the business is doing well, it's healthy. So, you know, I feel like we've been lucky to come out of it, but it was through lots of tough decisions and focus, and a really resilient organization and people that got us through.
Okay, I'm sorry. My business reporter hat. So I'm curious, wait, can you get cars? I mean, the rent car business, you sold all your fleet. I mean, how, and now there's a supply chain issue. I mean, are you able to get cars?
We are. It's slow. It's, we probably, we would like to get more cars, but yes, it's slowly, the supply chain issues are real, but I think we've been able to get cars.
Great.
So hopefully this year will ease a bit. Yeah.
Okay, great. I know everybody, people who want to buy cars, they can't get cars. Even consumers can't get cars. So anyways, Tracy, thank you for your thoughts and insights. We're going to talk to you a little bit more. We're going to talk to Liz, who, like me, is a regular, right, on Lunar New Year with Get Connected. So Liz, I'm gonna introduce you again, even though everybody knows who you are. So she's the general manager for television at GBH, overseeing its 7 Boston public media channels and the national nonfiction service World Channel, featuring 4 series she co-created, which won an Emmy, Peabody, DuPont, Columbia, and many awards honoring diversity. Prior to GBH, she has served as Vice President, Director of Programming Communication at ABC affiliate WCVB Channel 5. Liz, it's always good to see you.
Always great to see you. And thank you to you and Colette and everyone at Get Connected to inviting me to be on this incredible panel. So I'm in awe. So that's why I've been sitting here.
So when we gathered last January, this was before March 17th, the killings, 6 Asian American women targeted, in Atlanta area. And so how did that moment affect you?
Well, certainly as Tracy and certainly everyone has talked about on this panel, was a terrible tragedy that is still shocking, to be honest. But as a media person, I did notice that unfortunately the victims were victimized 2 more times after their deaths. The 6 victims who are Asian Americans were, if you remember, there was a Georgia police captain who had some very unfortunate things that he said that were picked up in the media back then. And I have to say, it wasn't the finest moment for media who broadcast these unfortunate comments. And if you recall, the captain said something like, the accused shooter had a bad day. And before he shot and killed 8 people, 6 of them Asian American women. And according to the suspect, he was trying to eliminate temptation because of some kind of addiction he had. And meanwhile, when it came out, so people all automatically assume things about the victims. And then when it came out that the 6 Asian American victims who perished were ages, I think I wrote them down, 74, 59, 74, 69, 63, 51, 49, and 44. And yet, they were further victimized by, comments that this shooter, the perpetrator, had made. And this tragedy and the further victimization of Asian American, most especially Asian American women, and the many attacks really cut deeply, I think, in the AAPI community. I haven't talked to anybody in the community who hasn't been affected. We were worried about the elderly, about children, people who are at risk, their families, friends. People were worried again and again about going to restaurants and Asian American supermarkets. And at a time when we were all trying to really support these small businesses, and people were afraid of gathering in restaurants or anywhere. And, even though, these businesses desperately needed our attention. But the interesting thing came for me, because over the years, having done a lot of these events, I've always sort of said, it's when you consider the fact that Asian Americans come from, I think it's, according to the UN, 48 different countries, that of course it's difficult to find any kind of unity around education, around immigration, around, voting, around all sorts of things, because, depending on when you came here, you're at a different socioeconomic level, different level of education, that it was sort of hard to kind of harness everyone. Well, these terrible attacks, helped to create the Stop AA Hate. And I have to say, it became the rallying cry for anyone who self-identifies as Asian American and Pacific Islanders. And this was an important union, I think, to sort of, finally bring us all together in a way that has been really unprecedented, I think, in my looking at the history of this country. And, personally, I have to say that, of course, we all know that there's certain places where we're not welcome, and, don't walk there, don't go there. But right after the Atlanta murders, I was walking my dog at 7 a.m. in my own neighborhood. I was 2 blocks from my house, and it was quiet. There was a pandemic. Nobody's on the street at 7 a.m. Doing anything, except that there was this big truck barreling towards me, and I thought, well, this is strange. And then he came right. He crossed the center line and came to the wrong side of the street to yell stuff at me. And at that moment, I was totally frozen, because I thought, if he wanted to run me over or do something, there's no one around to help, and there's no one around to witness this. And so I thought, well, this, we're all at risk here, and because these are random attacks, basically. But what I really also, in addition to AAPI coming together, what I really love to see is that all BIPOC groups came together. Because if you recall, after the death of George Floyd, all of us, all groups of difference came out in support of the Black community around this, demanding justice, agitating for justice, and all of the above. And in the same way, after the Atlanta murders, support for Asian Americans came from countless BIPOC groups, all those representing really every kind of difference. When you think about it, certainly our white allies and all of the above came out to decry and to say that these attacks cannot happen, and they certainly cannot continue. And if you recall, back then, anyone who was the reason why these attacks were happening is that we were being blamed for the pandemic and for the suffering, personal suffering of so many people. And all these multicultural leaders came out and said, this has got to stop. This is ridiculous. This has got to stop. And we have to be supportive, because we realize that when an attack happens on one group, it's really an attack on all of us who are different, all of us who have that difference. And when a group achieves justice, it benefits all of us. It raises all our boats. So it's important for us to support each other and to understand that we have to fight these negative attacks, regardless of what group it happens to.
No, I mean, I felt that after, certainly after March 17th last year, I felt a lot of support from the other groups, other BIPOC groups, and I think and a lot of us came together after Floyd, and I think we're still together now, and so it's great. I'm going to ask you a question about similarly to Tracy, about your career. I mean, because there are not that many Asian American women in media at the senior level. So what have you done? What do you think you've done? What's been your secret sauce to kind of break through?
I mean, I think that, it's important to not be afraid. I mean, I can't tell you how many compatriots of general managers of local television stations, I can count on one hand the number of Asian American general managers there are in this country. And I'm talking about and I'm talking about commercial and public media. So there are not a lot. And, there are many reasons for that. Many Asian Americans feel that they are not proficient in communication sometimes, or they feel like they're shy, or they want to be the number two, or they don't want to put themselves out there. I mean, for me, I tried never to say no to anything. If someone gave me an opportunity, even though I didn't know how to do that particular thing, I would always say yes. And early on, it was not easy, because, much like our mayor, I was the only, and usually the only person anyone ever had talked to who was Asian, never mind work alongside them. But, I have to say that there were so many allies who helped me, and folks have heard stories of, being, when I was trying to be a director, there was someone on the crew who refused to work with me. And so the whole production was stopped because this person refused to take any commands from me. And, this is humiliating, and I had a switcher who had to call all the shots, ready camera 1, ready camera 2, ready audio, had to do all those things for me because this person wouldn't listen. And that group that was on the crew with me, who had helped to train me and helped to support me, they went and they talked to this guy and he never did it again. So you need to have help like that. And by the same token, it's important for all of us who have achieved any level of success to bring along that next generation, to make it easier for them, to mentor them, to help them. Much as Tracy said, it's important to have mentors and people who can look out for you and can explain things to you and can help you. Because if we don't help to train that next generation that are like us or BIPOC or of any kind of difference, then it doesn't really work.
Mhm. Great. So I'm gonna bring Tracy and Liz together now for a conversation. Keep your questions coming. So we heard Mayor Wu at the top of the hour. What I was just wondering, each of you are Chinese American woman. So what does it mean to see a Chinese American woman elected as mayor of Boston? Tracy, you want to start?
Sure. I've been a longtime supporter and admirer of Mayor Wu. So I'm really excited for her and her administration. I think as a Chinese woman, you don't, it's the same thing, right? You don't see many of us in politics, in media, kind of what Liz saying, in technology, in the C-suite. So I think she's representing and trailblazing for and setting an example for all the women that maybe might have been interested in politics but didn't see themselves as being capable of getting there. So I think she's setting a great example, and I guess I feel extremely proud that we have in a city where I live that we've got a women leader. As Zipcar, we've been longtime partners in Boston as well, and I think we share a common goal, which is really to provide equitable and sustainable transportation. So I think we've had a partnership with the city for several years where we provide access to car sharing. You might have noticed our cars parked on street in around Boston. So I think that from my perspective, the goals and the alignment around providing equitable transportation is really is key. So I'm really excited to continue to work with the mayor and her team.
I found it to be a game changer, right up there with Kamala Harris. I mean, I think that I actually thought in my lifetime I would never see it. I thought, well, maybe I'll see a woman, maybe I'll see a person of color. I never ever thought that it would, even though I never thought that in my lifetime I'll be able to see a Chinese American woman become mayor, and it just couldn't be more exciting. Not to say that I had doubts in any of the candidates. I just didn't know the electorate if they were ready for it, and they were, and it's incredibly thrilling. And frankly, I wished that my parents were alive to see this. And they would have been so pleased and so thrilled, on the vice president level and on the mayor of Boston level. It would have meant so much to them.
Yeah. I mean, we forget Michelle Wu is national news for Chinese Americans and international. I remember my mom lives in San Francisco. She's like, how is Wu doing? And I remember, and certainly I think she was covered by the Taiwan press. She's actually, I should say Taiwan, Chinese American, Chinese, I guess, descent, but identifies as Taiwanese American. So, but yeah, no, it's great. It's great to see her elected, and also the statistic I love to repeat often is that she got more votes than Tom Menino or Marty Walsh ever did. So, I mean, it wasn't a squeaker. The city of Boston, the voters really wanted her, gave her a mandate. So, Council President Flynn talked about this earlier about the protests outside her home, Mayor Wu's home, racist attacks, over her vaccine mandate, over proof of vaccine. Did those attacks surprise you? Liz, do you want to start?
So on the one hand, given the level of political discourse and how it's gone downhill in the last, probably 8 to 12 years, no. But on the other side, in Boston, it did surprise me. And you wonder, which of the many firsts about Mayor Wu offended people and makes them really so angry. Is it the fact that she is the first woman? Is it the fact that she's the first person of color? Is it the fact that she's the first Chinese person? Is the fact that she is, younger than some of the other candidates? I think it's all of the above. And so when you have that kind of vitriol and that kind of aggression, they pick on anything that makes you different. It's like schoolyard again. And although we know that politics is a contact sport, it's really descended to a level that is very distressing.
So both of you, I lead efforts at your respective organizations on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I was wondering if you guys could talk about your DEI work at your organizations. And Tracy, I was hoping you could talk a little bit more what you've been doing at Zipcar.
Yeah, it's we've been doing quite a bit. We on two things. One is our goal is really to make Zipcar an inclusive place where people can bring their whole selves to work, and it's been a journey for us. I think there are two things that we instituted in the last, I would say, 18 months. The first was really having diversity goals just alongside business goals. So all of my leadership. We have to hit our business targets. They also have to hit diversity targets, and that's across hiring and across the board. And I think that for us, it was just setting the goalpost and keeping a stretch. And I think we have a year of data now, and we've really made a difference. When I look at the percentage of our workforce that's diverse, ethnically diverse, we've gone from like 35% a year ago to almost half. And this is really, really being intentional about hiring and really enabling our managers to also learn how to hire for diversity, right? And so enabling them to do that. The second thing we've done is really around creating the platform for conversation. When you think about racism, I think the first part is really acknowledging it, and then also making work is, I think one thing that's changed throughout all of this social justice movements, and I think it's a good thing, is that typically we used to never talk about these issues at the office, right? And I think what we've done is really create the platform. We've had panel discussions with our employees who are diverse and have them tell their stories. We've celebrated events. Last year for Asian American Heritage Month, we had people share their sort of family traditions across all different ethnic backgrounds. So that was it's not just sort of all like about racism, but it's really around celebrating our differences. And then we've done a lot around just education. We've had speakers that are experts on the topic of systemic racism. We had Dr. Livingston actually today from Harvard come speak to us around racism in the workplace. So it's been a learning journey, but I think for us it's really around learning, enabling the conversation, and also giving the leaders tangible goals. And I think that we have a long way to go, but I think we're definitely making progress.
Mm-hmm. So can you repeat that first stat? You said you went from 35 to 50%?
Right. 35 racially diverse employees to 50 to half.
And how did you in Boston? I guess Zipcar,
across our entire employee base, not just in Boston. So
what do you think you did? Was there one thing you did, or if you had to? That's quite that's impressive. It's probably not one thing.
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised as well. And we are, and part of it is we want to have diverse interview slates. I think a part of it is figuring out the pipeline, right? We source from different places. It's not just the same people that look, historically it was always, we were sourcing from the same universities, and we're just being a lot more creative around sourcing our candidates. And as managers, we are encouraging our managers to ensure that the interview panels are also diverse, so that when candidates come meet with us, that we are representative of what the company is. It's not just as a diverse place to work. So I think it's twofold. It's really around being intentional about sourcing, being intentional about the candidate experience, and also when they join, we do so much to just encourage discussion and celebration for our diversity. So I personally lead the power. Our ERG is called, and for those of you that know, ERG stands for Employee Resource Group, and it's really kind of a grassroots program, and I lead it. And it's been a joy just kind of seeing all the great ideas and that our employees have come up with, and the programming that's done. It's very authentic. And it's they do it all out of their spare time, so it's been really encouraging and a lot of fun.
Okay. All right, Liz is going to answer what's been going on at GBH on DEI, and then I'm gonna start answering your questions from the audience. So keep them coming.
Well, about 3 years ago, John Abbott and Claudia Palmer, who head up our foundation, decided that we really needed to do something around DEI. And the number one thing is to recognize that we all have bias. We all have bias. We just need to recognize them and work against them. And there's no shame in this. It's all of us who have this. And in recognition of that, we hired our first Chief Inclusion Equity Officer, Yemisi, who's done a fantastic job and put wonderful plans in place. We also hired our very first Director of Accessibility, which makes sense because GBH invented closed captioning, and we lead the country in closed captioning and certainly descriptions. So our DEI has really become DEI and A, which is accessibility. And we're looking at all those kinds of aspects. So we've developed under Yemisi and John, we've developed this 4-part strategy. And the first was to gather data and to get information. And we published that on our website. And in doing so, we show that we have a lot of work to be done, especially in terms of our staffing and senior management and all of the above. And so based on, and we're now doing our second cultural kind of survey to sort of get at sort of deeper kinds of issues. We've also established important priorities. Trainings, discussions. We started to pay interns, recognizing that sometimes less advantaged interns cannot take an internship at GBH because they have to earn money. So we're paying our interns so that they don't have those kind of issues. Hiring protocols, all of the above. Phase 3, we're inviting participation from all of GBH. So we've created 2 DEIA committees. One is sort of a think tank to sort of think broadly about going forward, what kind of changes we can make. And the second is to help implement the initiatives and everything that's happening. And phase 4 is a multi-year plan to embed DEIA in our DNA and certainly everything that we do. As you know, we produce a lot of content nationally. And so what we've also done is we have started to do kind of a real assessment of all our national content, and when I talk about that, I talk about what's the content, who's making that content, what are the voices, who's the audience, who's the staff, examining all those examples. So for example, a unit that I run, which is a world channel, which is our national diverse channel. We're now in 75% of US TV households. My core staff, 37% of my core staff is diverse. And for our filmmakers, we have 33% of our filmmakers are BIPOC, 51% are female, 48% are male, and 2% are non-binary. So we're starting to hold on to these and understand that, we don't have, we want to have multicultural makers who are reporting from their own communities. You need that kind of authenticity to be able to really tell those stories. And so, for coming up in May, we have 2 incredible films that were made by Asian Americans about Chinatowns. And one is called 3 Chinatowns and features a Chinatown here in Boston. Very excited about this. Our second film is called Chinatown Rising, and that's about San Francisco. So, we're sourcing these important films from the actual community. And, we're taking a multifaceted approach that addresses all aspects of difference, whether it's background, circumstances, or orientation, and accessibility.
Yeah, I love that. I've never heard that before. The A. Are you guys the only one doing it? But that's brilliant.
I believe so. I haven't heard of other people doing this. I know that Yemisi has, and John have presented at national conferences and all of the above because, it makes sense. I mean, GBH invented closed captioning, gosh, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and has advanced that in all industries. And they do a lot of captioning for films and a lot of, et cetera, et cetera. So it's something we do, live descriptions, everything that you can possibly imagine. And so it's important because, it's another aspect of, of diversity that's so important.
Great. So Tracy, there are a couple questions for you. So let me just start with one of them. So, Tracy, how do you navigate your identity in the C-suite or leverage it?
My identity in the C-suite. I guess, when I think about my identity, I'm Chinese American, right? And I'm a leader. So I think that there's a couple of things. One is, it's important to uplift women so that they cannot be in the C-suite as well. So for me, it was really about, creating opportunities. So I've been speaking at, women's clubs and really providing any kind of inspiration or guidance, career guidance that I can. So I think to Liz's point earlier, that's one thing is just making sure that, you're setting examples for young women that have aspirations to grow their career. The second piece is also around the mentorship. I think it's really important that, we continue to mentor and kind of pave the way for more women to be in the C-suite. I don't think about my identity so much as like, I think it's important not to think about your identity when you are doing your job. So for example, people ask questions like, oh, why is, how does it, I think there was a time when there was this whole Theranos, all these trials going on. And I think people were asking, oh, as a woman CEO, woman founder, like, how does this make you feel? And I'm like, well, this has nothing to do with being a woman, right? And this is like, we're too busy running our companies. This has nothing to do with being a woman. This is sort of, and I think it's important to kind of not say, oh, this is your gender plays a big role. At the end of the day, I'm doing it's important to take gender out of like the work that you do. Because I think oftentimes people always say, oh, how does it feel to be a woman CEO? And I'm like, well, it's nothing to do with gender. I think if you keep kind of separating the men and the women and the expectations of what they can deliver in their roles, I think that creates more inequity. So I think it's really important to just, recognize the merits for, what you do, regardless of what your gender is. Mm-hmm. I think that's what the question meant. Yeah.
All right. No, I think you answered it. Okay, there's another good question here about I don't know. Okay, this is very on the news. This is about the Supreme Court and the Harvard admissions case, the discriminatory Asian practices. Harvard's, there's a lawsuit against Harvard for the way it does admissions, race-based admissions, some of this has been, and so the question is, does the current lawsuit against Harvard on discriminatory admission practices directed toward Asians voice a valid concern about an anti-Asian undercurrent that has always been part of American history and now manifested subtly in college admissions? Liz, do you want to take that on?
It's funny. It's this is one of those hot button issues, and it really depends on where you stand in the argument.
Yeah.
For me, it should be more than race. It should also be access to opportunity and socioeconomic level. Because I heard when my son was applying to college that Asian Americans were not considered minorities, because essentially universities would get rich Asians from around the world to attend their college, pay full tuition, no issue. And meanwhile, those more recent immigrants who were Southeast Asians weren't getting the opportunity because they didn't have the kind of background and the help that they would need. I mean, those are the Asian Americans that really should be getting into these universities and should be giving the help up. And so for me, it's not so much about race. It's also about, perhaps it's probably race and socioeconomic level, because that is an important leveler. Because I can't tell you the number of Asian Americans who would be the first in their family to go to college, and to not have that kind of an opportunity and to have that kind of help, it seems to me a crime. Now, by the same token, people are feeling that it should be just race-based, but I'm not one of those. I believe that socioeconomics should also be an indicator.
Mhm, mhm. Liz, there's some history questions. So do you want to take on the issue of model minority, and where did that come from? And to kind of tell people, how that term has been used for and
Right.
against us.
So model minority, I grew up with this in my lifetime. My parents used to say to me, Liz, you're like the ambassador for your people, for Chinese people, for our family. You're probably going to be the first person that anyone's been friends with, worked with, gone to school with, all of the above. And I would always say, who made me the one? Who made me the chosen one? I didn't really want this. And I found over the years that it was a way in which to keep us in our place, basically. That we were like the pet, and this is the way you're supposed to behave. Put your head down, work hard, don't make a lot of ripples, don't complain, and you'll get, and in the end, you'll be able to have a living and all of the above. You might not rise in the ranks, but that's okay. And what it also ended up doing is creating divisions among other BIPOC people, because we were used that African Americans, why can't you be more like Asian Americans? Look, they're quiet and they don't complain. Or Latinos, how come you're doing this? And so it was a way to keep us down and to divide us from our BIPOC brethren.
Great. There's another question for you, Tracy. Let's see if I can find it here. It's a good question. It's about corporate America. Let's see. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. It says, I would love for Tracy to speak on what it's like for young people to prepare for corporate America, as far as what skills young people, women in particular, should acquire and how to best market themselves.
Great question. I think, one of the most important skills is communication. So I think that, how you make presentations, how you just coaching around how do you conduct yourself in a meeting. I think no one's like, when you think about college and you think about a skill, I think it's more important, especially when you're young, you're getting all the training you are on the job, but I think no one's really sitting you down and saying, hey, this is like how you should present. This is how you should go in. And so I think that what I would really encourage young people to do is and I do this for my team members as well, right? For junior members of our team, I try to create opportunities for them to present in a safe space, and I give feedback. And I think the more you do it, it's one of those communications is kind of one of those things, the more, it's not something you can just read a book and learn overnight. You have to just practice. And I think that if you think about leadership, a lot of it is around your ability to influence, your ability to collaborate, your ability to really lead. And so I think all of those skills are really important, but it really starts with the basics of communication. And I think it's really important. It's something that, I wish I had, I've kind of fumbled along in my career around presentations where I've had to give presentations to internal, external. And I think that training, if you will, has really kind of served me well. And I do think that that's something that I would encourage young people to say, even though you're scared of public speaking, try it in a safe space and keep trying, and you only get better.
Great. There's another good question here about what more can we do in Boston specifically to promote equity and inclusion so we can attract diverse people to Boston?
So I'm part of the Mass TLC, which is the Massachusetts Technology Council. And, for us, representing the tech community, I think for us, we really want to focus on technology is sort of like woefully underrepresented with diversity, especially for Black and Latinx. So we have a charter. We want to encourage companies to commit to our sort of diversity charter. And it's really simple. We have member companies join, and we ask them to make 3 commitments. And it's just a great example of just banding together as a community of technology companies. Like these are the things that I'm going to do differently in my organization to promote a more diverse ecosystem of employees in Boston. So, for example, for us, really as Zipcar, I committed to having diversity goals. I committed to having ERGs, and really being transparent and publishing and sharing with our employees what our stats are on our goals. And I think this is just one small example of some of the other larger companies are doing a lot more around hiring a chief diversity officer, as an example. And I think it's become this really great community for us to get together and share ideas on what works and what doesn't work. It's the beginning. We have some pretty ambitious goals, but I do think that improving on the technology sector and diversity of the technology sector will go a long way in Boston.
And I serve on the board of the partnership, which helps to train and attract, BIPOC, diverse executives and first level workers to Boston. And, so many companies, and it's very heartening to see folks really trying to do what I call diversity efforts to diversify their staff, to invite them to come in. But once they're here, what kind of support are those companies giving those folks? There is something in the industry that's called organ rejection, where you pay a lot of money, you find this incredible BIPOC leader, they come in and they leave after a year or two because they don't have cohorts, they don't feel supported, they don't really feel that they are part of a larger community that accepts them and recognizes them as their own. So it's more than just, so someone once described it to me as diversity is you invite people to the dance. Inclusion is, you take their suggestions as to, what music should be played, and equity is those people are the ones planning the dance. So you have to have all those different aspects to not only attract folks, but to help them, acclimate, and to help them find their cohorts, to help them find the neighborhoods and the friends and the churches they feel comfortable in, and to find people at work that they can commune with and have as their cohorts. Otherwise, you're going to have, people who come here for 2 years and then leave.
Great. All right, I'm gonna have one more question. One last question. Though I feel it's a doozy. Liz, I'm gonna give it to you. But you can have a one-word answer, maybe.
Thank you, my friend. Oh no, what is this?
This is an economist, Barry Bluestone. He says, I think we all agree that the level of hate in our country has increased dramatically over the past 4 or more years. How much is this hatred against Asians, Blacks, Jews, and others as a result of Trump giving voice to those who have harbored hate and now have the liberty to show their hate publicly? I know that's a question Tracy won't touch, but Liz might touch.
I mean, there's a lot of correlations certainly to that, but they're both sides of that, to be honest. So I remember one year we try to air films that are balanced, right? And so we have a lot of films that are interesting but might be considered controversial to liberals. And there was one that was called Red for Blue, and it followed around Tea Party Republicans trying to get grassroots support for their platform, which if you're liberal you don't agree with. And people felt it was just a day in a life. There was no kind of voiceover, but just you got to see these people traveling from town to town, and they were being spat upon, and they were being just amazingly terrible things were happening to them. You couldn't help but feel sorry for them, because they would go into kind of more democratic liberal enclaves, and they were treated very poorly. I got so much grief over that film, because there are people who are saying that we were being too sympathetic to Tea Party politics and all of the above. So to a certain extent, there's plenty there on both sides. But yes, I think that for whatever reason, that people feel comfortable not only in saying stuff, but doing stuff. And that's been a huge problem. Now, we can go back and forth as to why this is, but by the same token, it's important that we try to stop it and we try to do something about it. And we can do that individually. I always say to people, see something, hear something, say something. So a while back, as you know, I started a series called Stories from the Stage, because as a journalist, we spend a lot of time concentrating on all our differences, conflict, things that we don't like about each other, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we wanted to create a pro-social platform. And it's multicultural tellers talking about everything from, families, immigration, standing up for a cause, all of the above. Because my feeling is, if you know someone's story and how they got to where they are today, it's harder to fear and to hate them. And so, I as you know, I have affiliates all around the country. I have 191 stations that air world. And occasionally I have stations who call me and say, I cannot air that documentary you have because of XYZ. And I had even one station that had to take us off the air for a month because a certain very conservative US senator came home and, his grandchildren were watching a film on World Channel that he didn't agree with. But I have to say, with Stories from the Stage, with all the controversial topics and all the controversial stories that we cover, I have never had a station call me and say, I had to take that show off the air. Because by the time you hear someone's story of how they got over these incredible obstacles, there's an empathy and there's a understanding that there's similarities. And as Tracy said, there's a celebration of our differences, not just a tolerance, but a celebration.
Great. That was a great way to end it and end this. But can I have one little factoid that I want to ask? A lightning round. So because it's the Lunar New Year, we're celebrating the Year of the Tiger. So what's your year, and how do you have like a Lunar New Year tradition? Tracy, why don't you start? What's your year?
I'm the Year of the Dragon, and my mother makes this rice cake like from scratch every Chinese New Year, and I never get to have it when I'm not home for Chinese. She lives in New York, but she's actually here with us for this Chinese New Year, so I'm really excited to learn how to make it myself.
I have a family of dragons, but you're the first female dragon. I don't know that many female dragons. They tend to be men. So this is great. I know what you are, Liz. Tell everyone.
So I'm a monkey and my husband's a dragon. And so of course, for the lunar holiday, it's food, food, and more food. And my husband laughs and says, we Chinese have 3 states of being: about to eat, currently eating, and have just eaten.
Yes, that's a very familiar phrase in my household too. So I'm Year of the Rat. I love to be with family, but this year it's Omicron. I probably won't be in New York with my family. So, but we'll have to do it some other time. But thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Liz. Liz, you gave us D, E, I, and A. And Tracy, you gave us metrics, right? Diversity metrics to live by and to talk about. And I love the fact that you chair your employee resource group. Is that what you said? That's unusual. Usually the presidents don't chair them, right? Usually it's
no, they don't. But I participate and support.
Right.
Our employees are doing all the good work.
Right,
So.
but that's impressive. That's how you build an inclusive culture. So that's terrific. Anyways, I'm going to hand this back to our honorary Asian, Colette Phillips. So thank you again for bringing us together. And I'm going to hand this virtual stage back to you.
Thank you so much, Shirley. What a rich and engaged and lively discussion. And, Shirley has a way of getting you to talk about things. And the next thing you say, did I really say that? And she is so good at her job. And I want to say once again, thank you to NAP Boston and Chin May. Thank you, Leverett. Thank you, President Flynn. And I want to thank our amazing panelist, Liz Chen, who I have known for 3 decades, believe it or not, but we looked so young. And
They were
Tracy,
teenagers.
exactly. And Tracy, thank you. And of course, the amazing and incomparable Shirley Leon and her moderating skills like no other. And last but not least, it does take a village to pull an event like this together. So I want to thank my village. I want to thank Leverett for always standing in the gap and being so supportive of our events. PNC Bank for being our presenter sponsor, and the Get Connected team with Mary Helen Gillespie, Ryan Littner, Daniel Delaney, Maggie Carr, Sky Milerba, and Julie Lynn Bellon, who is our event planner. Thank you all, and thank everyone for being here. And let me just say again, Happy New Year and Gung Hei Fat Choi.